She was an experiment gone awry inside of a deranged Romanian scientist's underground lab many centuries ago. The scientist wanted to instill in her the power of the unspoken word, so he decided to withhold the implantation of her vocal cords. There was a possibility in the distant future that he would bestow upon her this gift, the gift of a voice, but not until she fully understood the value of silence. The lab was dimly lit, with just a dozen or so candles scattered around. An array of misshapen test tubes lined the cobweb-encrusted walls, casting what seemed to be endless shadows that appeared to engulf her, swallowing her up in a shroud of blackness. The shadows were her only companions. At first, she was fearful and dreaded the mid-afternoon, when the shadows would appear. But within a few weeks, she greatly anticipated and welcomed the darkened images, because they somehow made her feel less alone. The scientist, her creator, seldomly ventured down into his lab, but his presence was always looming within those shadows. One day, she had noticed a low window off in the corner, which was coated with dirt and cobwebs, and what appeared to be spider eggs. The webs clung to the window pane like macabre curtains, swaying back and forth from the draft, emitting from the cracks in the walls. Dozens of perfectly aligned shimmery spider eggs glistened in the sunlight, rows and rows of baby spiders just waiting to emerge. Aside from the mad scientist, there was nothing she feared more than those spiders that had crept around in the lab. In the evening, she could hear them scurrying around in search of food or a new nesting place. On several occasions, she had awoken in the middle of the night to find dozens of them spinning their webs around her toes. It took a few days after noticing the webs, but one morning she finally summoned up the courage to brush the cobwebs away from the window. She grabbed one of the empty test tubes, and with every bit of strength that she had within her, she hoisted herself up onto the window ledge. She then brushed the test tube across the glass, slowly gathering up the cobwebs. Within moments, the lab was flooded with sunlight. She peered through the glass, somewhat hesitantly. Her eyes widened in astonishment at the vision that was before her of the sprawling manor. It was extraordinary, a sight of which she knew she would never experience. Rolling hills, willow trees, and an overgrown field that seemed to stretch on endlessly. She closed her eyes tightly and envisioned herself frolicking in the overgrown field, the grass tickling her feet as she ran through it. With the exception of the spiders, the insects became welcomed friends. They had their own little world within hers. To her, the insects were not creepy, crawly monsters like how she viewed the spiders, but rather they were glorious specimens of nature, and possibly inhabitants of that beautiful and mysterious overgrown field. The ladybugs twirled their tiny sun umbrellas in unison while dancing on the flower petals that were beautifully illuminated by the sun, resulting in a golden aura which encompassed them and seemed to even animate them. She pressed her nose up against the glass and gazed at them for hours. And if she had the strength, she would have smashed that glass and escaped. But where would she have escaped to? This web-encrusted lab was all she had ever known. Winter had approached as quickly as summer and enveloped the field in a blanket of white. The icicles encased the wilting tree branches, constricting their growth as they helplessly dangled in the wind. She couldn't help but think what a perfect visual depiction that was of her situation, and it was indeed inevitable. Sooner or later, those branches would break and that ice would shatter. One morning, the silence had become too overwhelming for her. She bit down on her lower lip, hard enough to draw blood, and repeatedly traced the outline of the sun. She had smeared onto the glass with her index finger, with dirt just a few days prior. The next morning, the mad scientist walked down the stairs that led down into the dungeon and was instantly overcome with the frigid air of winter. The floor was sparkling with broken glass. Right below the window, just beyond that window, were footprints in the snow. Footprints that led toward the overgrown field. Footprints that had led toward